Hi everyone, my name is Amandine Flachs and I am the CEO and co-founder of WildMeta. Today, I'm here to talk about machine learning in games. In the past 5 years or so, we've been hearing more and more about machine learning and how it is completely transforming some industries, including gaming. I know sometimes some news make AI look like it's all done by magic or sounds too good to be true, and let's be honest, sometimes it is. There are so many ways to use machine learning and apply it to a number of problems. The key is to find the right application and, even more importantly, how to fit into the ecosystem in place. This, of course, applies to video games too. Today, I plan to mention several applications for machine learning in games, and I am going to start with one I've been personally working on for years, using machine learning to create smarter bots and non-playable entities. Before talking about why using machine learning for NPCs is cool, let's first take a moment to look at the problem. Games have been more and more complex over the years, but the way games AIs are made hasn't evolved much and they're still following a script. The results? Well, when you ask players about good game AIs, they mostly have in mind games that are from 10 years ago. Let's take pathfinding, for example. You do have well-known algorithms and techniques for pathfinding that will enable a character to navigate a map, and it does work fine on its own for a number of games. But with the increasing complexity of modern video games, you still end up today with NPCs that continue to struggle to go from point A to point B. That's something machine learning can definitely help with. Another example, with a constantly growing interest in multiplayer and competitive games, there are many reasons why you would want and need your servers filled with players constantly, and one obvious reason is that no one wants to wait to launch a game. Now, it doesn't have to be human playing. Today, in games like PUBG, it is said that there's between 20 and 95% of bot per game. That's huge! But who cares if you don't notice it and still enjoy the game? Thing is, it's not the case, as you can easily spot the bot, because they are not great and end up being more of target practices. As I said, game AIs today are following a script, which means it requires a huge amount of work to make them believable characters. What if you could use machine learning instead to teach a bot to play like a human? What if you couldn't tell if that's a human playing or a bot playing with you? Here is a short clip from Dota 2. If you are a MOBA fan, you can easily see the character we follow uses creeps, denies last hits, and makes the most of its tower defense. For those who are less familiar with MOBA games, these are fairly common techniques used by human players, but it's not a human playing. It's one of the bots we created at WildMeta. We didn't ask the characters to do these actions in sequence. We made it learn to play the game so it can choose its move on its own during the game. I created WildMeta in 2019 to help game developers by creating smarter and more human-like game AIs using machine learning. Quite often I am asked what are the advantages of machine learning bots. So first, the machine learning AIs learn to specifically play your game. They will react to their environment and choose their next actions accordingly to the player's move. Second, machine learning-based bots can learn human tactics directly from existing gameplay. Let's say you have launched an open beta of your game or early access and notice that players have developed some interesting tactics. We can use their gameplay to show the AI and teach it these new potential tactics. Third, with machine learning, you can also create game AIs that are more flexible and robust to changes. For example, more and more games are using procedural generation, which adds a level of complexity for bots. If you take that into consideration, during the training of the AI, it will learn to adapt to it. Now, that's the main benefits, but the list goes on depending on the type of games and needs we're talking about. I haven't, for example, mentioned the potential of these bots for testing purposes, and that's something we're actually talking a lot about with studios. Which leads me to talk about their use. Training an AI to play your game is one thing, but it is important to understand what role it will have. You can use machine learning bots either as an NPC or another player. You can use it for the opponent AI, also as a training bot, especially for competitive games, which will also help players avoid potential toxic communities. Let's say you're a League of Legends player. You could, for example, reproduce very specific strategies from a past game or train to play a defined role. For those who play support, that's something especially difficult to do today. Training bots were actually our main focus when we started WildMeta. Another example, sometimes players get disconnected when you're in the middle of a multiplayer game, and that can be an issue. You could replace players mid-games with bots, so other players aren't affected. You can also use them to join a squad team to play in collaboration with humans, with bots able to follow orders but also do things on their own that actually help players without being commanded. And as I mentioned just before, for QA and testing to help the developers directly during the creation of the game. If you want to stress test your servers for the launch of your upcoming MMO, it can be hard to get test players together. We can get as many bots to do that instead. They could also be trained to explore the world and find and report bugs along the way. These are some of the many concrete applications of machine learning-based bots. Now, I hear you already. If machine learning is so great, why isn't it already everywhere in game development? When we think about machine learning in games, the first example that usually comes to mind are the work done by AI research organizations, such as OpenAI or DeepMind, that use video games to demonstrate their work. They manage to build AI as good as the best human professional players in the world at Dota 2 for OpenAI and StarCraft 2 for DeepMind. Since then, we've seen more and more AAA studios talking about how they use this technology, and a recurring theme has been using machine learning for animations. Companies like Ubisoft, especially Ubisoft La Forge in Montreal, have been sharing some articles and research work on this. Embark also, as you can see here, or Insomniac Games and Sony using machine learning for their animation, already in production in the most recent Spider-Man games. When I talked about game AIs earlier, I mentioned the importance of creating believable characters. WildMeta focuses on the characters' behaviors and decisions, but animations are another key element of making a character believable. There have been many memes and videos from Mass Effect Andromeda when the game first launched, and well, we saw that even if a character's actions make sense, if they can't walk the stairs properly, then it won't work. To their credits, developers of the game have improved this a lot since then. Okay, so more examples now. For Microsoft Flight Simulator, Asobo, the studio behind the game, converted 2D maps into 3D and is using in-game real-time weather simulations. A few weeks ago, Microsoft also mentioned using machine learning to create an unbeatable game AI for the upcoming Age of Empires 4, and I can't wait to see players to play against it. Forza has been using machine learning for its drivatar system for cars trajectory, and there's actually some very interesting deep dive on that system in case you're interested in checking it further. Electronic Arts also shared some articles about machine learning to help balance difficulty in the game. Unfortunately, with the way game studios work and especially the way they are financed, not every studio can afford to have a dedicated research team internally. Here are the major common barriers to entry I have identified after talking to a large number of studios. The first barrier is technical. Access to talent is already hard, but access to talent with both machine learning and gaming experience is pretty rare. Plus, they need to understand compute requirements and understand a very different tech stack. Now, the second aspect is managerial. Machine learning development doesn't really work the same way as traditional software development. Technically, of course, but also when it comes to planning, it can be hard to understand how it is going to fit into your existing time frame and agenda, or even with the rest of the team. The third barrier is monetary. The R&D cost to build a system from scratch is quite high, and studios' budgets are often tied to a game or a project. This means it can be hard to justify the initial development cost for only one game. There's also the compute need and cost to add to this. But that doesn't mean that new technologies have to be only reserved for the biggest studios. I see different paths to facilitate the adoption of machine learning in-game in a way that benefits both the players and the game developers. For example, you can use open source projects or openly available tools that offer pre-trained models for specific needs. I'm sure many of you have already used deepfake tools or synthetic faces generators. You have several of them made available by the open source community and that do not require to understand machine learning to get your results. A company that understood that pretty well is OpenAI and its GPT-3 API, used by an increasing number of developers across the world. If you've played the text-based game AI Dungeon, the team used an anterior version of GPT-3, so GPT-2. Another way to start adopting machine learning is through working with specialized partners that are usually going to focus on one specific purpose only. For example, there is a London-based startup called Sonantic. They are creating synthetic voices using machine learning and especially focus on video game production. Another example is Ask Blue. I've heard the founder speak at an event before summer and their focus is on mobile game balancing and real-time personalization. And of course, my team at WildMeta. Being a specialized outsourcing company solely focusing on machine learning game AIs gives us the opportunity to talk directly to game developers and really understand the challenges with game AI and, more importantly, answer the question when it comes to machine learning. One of the main questions we hear from them is actually on how this technology fit into the existing tech stack. And I don't think that's something that only worries game developers, but actually anyone adopting new technologies. That's why we've been actively listening to studios and we decided to build our own library that interacts directly with the game engine to access what our machine learning system needs to train the AIs. This is a way of demystifying machine learning without adding complex new concepts or concerns for the developers by talking the same language, which I believe is key for adoption. While I have no doubt there will be more in-house machine learning experts in the future in game studios, I also don't see how most studios will adopt this technology today on their own without a little help from people who understand machine learning but also understand how studios work. In video games, everyone is waiting for the next major title. We see an increasing coverage on the tech behind it, but it's seen as definitely less sexy. One of the common misconceptions I hear is people thinking this technology isn't going to be ready for production before years, but I can tell you, it is already ready for production today. I'm sure machine learning is going to be massively used in games development in the years to come. We just need to see more studios talking openly about it and start an open discussion with everyone part of the game development, including developers, designers, or publishers. Thanks everyone for your time, and I look forward to hear your questions.